The night was a void, a black shroud swallowing the Ohio woods, where even the stars seemed to hold their breath. My father and I, two shadows, armed with rifles, stepped into that darkness, chasing whispers of death we couldn't yet name. My father's voice still echoes in my skull, low and gravelly, recounting a tale that clawed its way into my childhood and never let go. It was the first story he ever told me. Not of heroes or adventures, but of a night that stole my grandfather, his own father, from him. He called it a skinwalker, a name borrowed from a Navajo legend his grandfather whispered to him under flickering lamplight. The internet, years later, would call it the rake. But names don't matter when you're staring into the face of something that shouldn't exist. We lived on a dairy farm in Ohio, a place where the earth smelled of hay and hardship. Money was scarce, so we hunted coyotes for $50 a pelt, a grim necessity that sent us into the woods each night. Sometimes we'd stumble across a deer, its eyes wide with trust, before we took its life to feed our family. That night, we'd finished our rounds, our boots heavy with mud, our rifles heavier with purpose. We had no car, no four-wheeler, just our legs to carry us through the dense forest toward home. The air was thick, not with sound, but with a stillness that pressed against my chest, like the world was waiting for something to break. We cut through the woods, the path familiar, yet alien, under the moon's pale gaze. That's when we found it, a scene that burned itself into my eyes. Blood coated everything. It dripped from the trees, pooling in the grass, staining the creek red. It wasn't the clean kill of a predator. Coyotes, wolves, even feral dogs, they hunt with precision, targeting the weak, the old, the small. They corner their prey, tear out its throat, and leave nothing to waste. This was different. 3 deer, or what was left of them, lay scattered like broken toys, a head here, a leg there, a torso twisted in the dirt. My father's face tightened, his jaw a rigid line. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs, rabid, perhaps driven mad by hunger. But I saw the truth in his eyes, a flicker of fear he couldn't hide. Predators don't kill for sport. Whatever did this reveled in the slaughter, painting the forest with death for no reason but its own twisted joy. He told me to go home, his voice sharp, urgent. I was 13, clutching a .22 rifle, a pocket knife, my only other defense. Leave him. Walk 2 miles through those woods alone. No. I stayed, my heart pounding like a war drum, refusing to abandon him to whatever lurked in the shadows. We followed the blood trail, a scarlet ribbon winding through the trees. It wasn't hard to track too much blood for a single deer, too deliberate, as if something wanted us to follow. The forest was alive, not with the usual hum of crickets or rustle of leaves, but with a chaos of screams, foxes, rabbits, raccoons, birds, all fleeing in a frenzy. I'd been in woods across the world, but never had I heard such panic. Birds crashed into trees, blind in their desperation to escape. A pack of coyotes bolted past us, their eyes wild, ignoring us completely. Deer rabbits, even wild hogs, all predators, and prey united in flight from something worse. What kind of creature makes the entire forest run? My father's hand tightened on his shotgun, his knuckles white. He'd fought in wars, faced death, in ways I'd only heard in his late-night stories, yet I'd never seen him scared until that moment. His courage was a beacon, pulling me forward, even as my instincts screamed to turn back. We should have listened. We should have run. But curiosity, that cruel human flaw, drove us deeper into the night. The trail led us to an open valley, a soy field barren out of season, its flat dirt stretching under the moonlight like a graveyard. The animal tracks we'd seen, deer, coyote, hog, vanished at the edge of the blood trail, as if the creatures refused to cross an invisible line. The tracks we followed now were different, shallow, delicate, belonging to something light no heavier than 100 pounds. A bobcat once nearly tore my throat out, weighing half that. Light doesn't mean weak. These tracks were precise, deliberate, leading us straight to an old schoolhouse on a hill, half ruined by a tornado, abandoned for years. We'd found vagrants there, before drug addicts seeking shelter in its crumbling walls. Maybe that's all it was, a sick kid, high on something, lost in a frenzy. But the air told a different story. It was heavy, rancid, like rotting meat left to fester. 50 yards out, a sound pierced the night, a screech high and jagged, layered with a low, guttural growl, like two voices fighting to be heard. It was unnatural, like paper tearing, while water sloshed in a bucket. A sound that clawed at your mind. My father knelt, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "We're about to corner it. Any animal fights when it's trapped." He thought it was a rabid dog, a lone predator we could handle. The plan was simple: sneak up while it fed, shoot it, keep shooting until it stopped moving, then slit its throat to be sure. If it got to him, I was to fire my .22 or stab it with my knife. I nodded my hands, trembling my rifle, slick with sweat. We crept closer, the schoolhouse looming like a tomb. At 20 yards, the sound grew louder, more visceral, like bones snapping under pressure. We reached the schoolhouse, its brick walls glistening with blood under the moonlight. There, hunched over a deer carcass, was it? Not a dog, not a man, something else. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over a frame that was human, but wrong arms and legs, too long hunched, like a monkey. Fingers ending in claws that gleamed like obsidian. It tore at the carcass, not eating, but shredding, flinging flesh aside, as if the act itself was the meal. Blood coated its hands, its face, its chest, a grotesque parody of life. My father froze, his shotgun raised but unsteady. He couldn't shoot a person, or what looked like one. He cleared his throat, a soft sound meant to get its attention. The world stopped. For 2 seconds, the forest fell silent. No wind, no animals, no breath. Then it turned. Its head snapped toward us, eyes like black pits, endless and hungry. A shrill cry erupted, splitting the air, and it lunged. My father fired the shotguns, roar deafening, but if he hit it, the thing didn't care. It was on him in an instant, claws ripping into his torso, tearing skin like paper. I screamed, firing my .22 point-blank 5 shots into its side. The bullets barely broke its skin, a trickle of dark ichor, the only sign I'd hit anything. It didn't flinch, didn't even notice me. It clawed at my father, peeling away his flesh, his throat, his nose, his eyes. It scalped him, ripped his jaw apart, the bones in his neck snapping like dry twigs. I swung my rifle, smashing the butt against its head. But it was like striking stone. I don't know how it happened. Maybe my father's strength, maybe blind luck. But his knife ended up buried in the thing's shoulder. It staggered just enough for me to grab him, or what was left of him, and run. I slung his body over my back, his weight crushing me, his blood soaking my clothes. I ran faster than I thought possible. The forest a blur, the thing's screeches chasing me like a storm. Branches snapped behind me, trees groaning as if something massive tore through them. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Half a mile away, I tripped on gravel, collapsing near my landlord's house. His buddies sat around a campfire, their faces pale as I screamed for help. The landlord's eyes widened. "What's that on your back?" he asked. I turned, and there was my father, or what remained. His head, his torso, nothing below the waist. He'd been gone before I even started running, and I'd carried a corpse for miles. The thing screeched again. Closer now, its shadow moving past the fire. The men dragged me inside, locking doors, grabbing guns. Something crashed through a window. Not the creature, but the landlord's dog. Its body torn apart, headless, legless. We barricaded the garage door as metal and glass shattered inside. The thing was in the house. Now, it screams louder, closer. We rushed to the upstairs door, slamming it shut as its claws scratched through. A shotgun blast severed its hand, but it only grew angrier, splintering the door. 3 men fired wood and ears exploding, and then silence. The police arrived at dawn, prying me from the door. They called it a wolf, maybe a bear. The hand we'd shot off, gone. The cop who bagged it died in a crash, the evidence lost. They said it was an animal's paw, but I know what I saw. I worked for the landlord after that, never speaking of it. At 19, I joined the army, asking him one last time what happened. He went missing during my training, the cops claiming he fled debts. I don't believe it. Years later, my mother died. My father, haunted by that night, went back to those woods to settle scores. He never returned. The FBI searched, but I knew they'd find nothing. Those woods hold secrets no man can kill. It's 9:45 p.m., and the world outside feels like it's holding its breath. The air in the pizza shop is thick with the scent of dough and grease, but my stomach churns, not from hunger, but from a creeping dread I can't shake. I'm folding pizza boxes in the back, the repetitive task numbing my mind, when the counter girl, barely 16, her ponytail swinging, shoves a delivery slip into my hand. Her voice trembles slightly as she whispers, "This guy sounded weird. Like he was talking through a fan or something, all garbled and gurgling." My gut twists. I've seen enough in DC's rougher corners to know that weird can mean trouble. Benzo freaks, pill heads, or worse. I glance at the address, 134, a lonely spot on the edge of nowhere, tucked beside a 500-acre stretch of woods locals call open space. It's a 25-minute drive far past the comfort of streetlights into a place where the night swallows sound and secrets alike. I'm a senior at a college in Washington, D.C. Not the glossy part you see on postcards, but the gritty streets where cops are more comforting than threatening. At 21, I'm 6'1", 240 pounds, mostly muscle, though I could stand to lose a few from my love of cheap beer and late-night suet. By day, I crunch numbers for a PR firm making $20 an hour to catch every penny our clients try to short us. By night, I sling pizzas for a hole-in-the-wall joint 5 minutes from the beach with a delivery radius that stretches absurdly far 50 minutes north, where the world turns to endless fields and silent forests. College isn't cheap, And this gig keeps my fridge stocked and my car running. Tonight, though, something feels off, like the universe is whispering a warning I'm too stubborn to hear. The delivery slip in my hand feels heavier than it should. The ink smudged, like it's been handled by sweaty palms. The order is bizarre. A large pizza piled with $15 worth of extras, anchovies, ground beef, ham sausage, pepperoni, the works. It's the kind of order that screams excess, like someone's trying to prove something. I ask the counter girl, Sarah, if she got it right. She shrugs, her eyes darting nervously. I think so. He was hard to understand, like he was underwater or something. I did my best. She's young, probably daydreaming about TikTok or her crush while taking the call. I cut her some slack, but decide to verify. I dial the number on the slip. It rings 5, 10, 20, 30 times. Nothing. I hang up. Try again. This time, it cuts straight to a robotic voice. The number you have dialed does not have a voicemail box set up. Goodbye. My manager, a gruff guy named Tony, who smells like garlic and regret, waves it off. Make the damn pizza and deliver it. We're not losing a sale over this. I nod, but the unease in my chest tightens like a vice. Before I tackle this order, I have another delivery. A quick one to a guy so big he could probably bench press my Subaru, and a couple who try to rope me into drinks. I don't drink or smoke on the job, a rule I stick to like gospel. By the time I'm back, the weird order's still sitting there, mocking me. No one else has taken it, and it's my turn again. Great. I grab the pizza, the heat from the box seeping into my hands, and slide into my car. The address goes into my phone's GPS, a side street off open space, a park that's less a park and more a sprawling, untamed wilderness. I crank up some dubstep, the bass thumping through my turbocharged Subaru, trying to drown out the growing knot in my stomach. The road stretches out, and the further I drive, the more the world fades. Street lights vanish, houses thin out, and the night presses in heavy and silent. Winter, in the countryside, is a different kind of quiet. If you've never been out here, it's hard to explain. There's no hum of traffic, no distant chatter, just a void where sound should be. Unless something bigger than a cat moves, the silence is absolute, like the forest is holding its secrets close. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating bare trees that claw at the sky like skeletal fingers. I pass the last signs of civilization, the houses growing sparse, each sitting on acres of land isolated and lonely. I'm looking for 1134. I pass 11:30, then a long stretch of nothing, just road and woods. The numbers pick up again at 11:44. What the hell? Did I miss it? My phone's GPS insists I'm close, but there's nothing here but shadows and silence. I try calling the number again, desperate for clarity. It rings endlessly, then click. Someone picks up. No voice, just a low, buzzing hum, like a swarm of bees trapped in a tin can. It grows louder, vibrating through my car's stereo until I slam the phone down, afraid it'll fry my speakers. The windows are fogging up now, the air inside the car thick with my own breath. I roll them down, and a wave of stench hits me. Rotting trash, like a landfill on a hot day, mixed with something sharper, metallic, like blood left to fester. It's not trash day, and there's no dumpster in sight. My heart's pounding now, each beat a hammer against my ribs. I shift into first inching toward the next house, hoping to ask if they gave the wrong address. At the end of the driveway, a stone pillar glows under a single light, casting long shadows. There, a figure steps from the darkness into the circle of light, tall and looming, like a specter summoned from the void. I exhale, thinking it's the customer, but something's wrong. He's too still, too silent, like a statue carved from nightmares. I stop the car about 10 feet away, my hands shaking as I grab the pizza and step out. The guy's wearing a massive black coat, 3 sizes too big, hanging off his frame like a shroud. He's got to be 6'6" or taller, dwarfing me despite my size. No shoes, just bare feet, pale and filthy, poking out from ripped jeans, stained with dark, irregular patches. The smell is stronger now. Choking like death itself is standing in front of me. I force myself to speak, my voice cracking. "Hey, sir, sorry about all the calls. This delivery's pretty far out." No response. He doesn't move, doesn't blink. I glance at his face, and my blood runs cold. His eyes are wrong, sunken black like twin voids where pupils should be. The light from the pillar should reflect something, anything, but it's like staring into a bottomless pit. My skin crawls, every instinct screaming to run. Stay calm. Don't look away. I set the pizza on the roof of my car, keeping him in my peripheral vision. His head starts bobbing, not a natural sway, but a jerky mechanical motion, like a car door catching halfway and needing a shove to open fully. It's unnatural, inhuman, and it goes on for 10 agonizing seconds. The silence is deafening, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the woods. I'm frozen, my heart a drumbeat in my ears, but I force myself to move. I grab my phone, holding it low against the car roof, never breaking eye contact with those hollow eyes. Curiosity and fear wrestle inside me as I redial the number. The phone rings, my hand, but then faintly, impossibly, a matching ring echoes from the woods, maybe 50 yards away. My stomach drops. He's not holding a phone. I force a laugh, my voice trembling. Hey, can you come get this? Also, I think you dropped your phone. Or maybe you were hiding a body in the woods or something. It's a weak joke, a desperate attempt to break the tension, but it falls flat in the suffocating air. His mouth opens, and my world tilts. A slow guttural grunt escapes, followed by a high-pitched one, then another low grunt, like an animal trying to mimic speech. It's soft, almost like someone clearing their throat, but it's wrong, so wrong. My knees buckle, and I'm one step from bolting to the driver's seat. I redial the number, praying for an answer, something to make sense of this. Then he speaks, his voice a jagged, broken thing, each word torn from some unnatural place. That phone's not mine. The pause between phones, not and mine, is too long, the pitch shifting unnaturally high on the last word. My mind screams, DEFCON 5 panic flooding my veins like ice water. I shove the pizza to the far side of the car roof, my hands trembling. Sir, you're freaking me out. I've got a 45 and less than $20. Just take the pizza and let me leave. His head stops bobbing. Those black crater eyes bore into me, burning through my skull. His mouth opens again wider this time, and he says, What? His what? The words don't make sense, like he's parroting something he doesn't understand. Then, in a single, spasmodic lurch, he moves toward the car, not a step, but a jerk, like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. The phone was his. I'm shaking now, tears pricking my eyes. He lurches again closer and says, Phone's not his anymore. My brain short circuits. I scream, I'm calling the cops, man. Just get out of here. And then, in a voice that's not his, a voice I've never heard, high and mocking, like it's coming from somewhere else entirely. He says, Go away. Stop following me. I will call the police. The words chill me to the bone, not just for their meaning, but for the way they slither out, unconnected to the movement of his lips in one jerky motion. He reaches for the pizza, his long, pale fingers brushing the box. He drops 2 quarters on the roof, and I see it, dark, viscous liquid pooling around them, spreading like spilled ink. It's not oil, not grease. It smells like copper, like blood. I don't think. I dive into the car, leaving the hot sleeve. The pizza, everything. The doors barely closed as I slam the gas, peeling out at 80 miles an hour. The road blurs my heart, pounding so hard I can't hear the dubstep anymore. I whip past the spot where he stood, and he's gone, vanished into the night like he was never there. At the stop sign to merge onto the main road, I glance right to check for traffic. Clear. I glance left, and his face is there, inches from my window, those black eyes swallowing the light. I scream, my foot slamming the pedal tires, screeching as I tear down the road. Back at the pizza shop, I'm shaking so bad I can barely stand. I light a cigarette, breaking my own rule, the smoke doing nothing to calm the storm in my chest. I stumble inside, and Sarah looks up, her face pale. "Hey, that guy from Open Space called back. Said you forgot some food, but he only ordered the pizza, right? He wants you to come back." My knees give out, and I'm crying right there in front of her, not caring how it looks. My phone, tossed around in my frantic drive, shows 14 missed calls from that number. I check the voicemails empty, except the last one. Ragged breathing, low grunts like the sounds he made in the driveway. I'm sobbing now, barely able to speak. I tell Sarah to call the number again. She tries over and over, but it goes straight to voicemail. I step outside, needing air, needing to move. I grab a flashlight and check my car. The roof is smeared with that same viscous fluid, thick and dark and reeking of copper. In the panel gap between the trunk and rear window, I find the quarters stuck in a mess of syrupy goop. And there, caught in it, is something soft, pale, a chunk of tissue glistening under the light. My stomach heaves, and I vomit onto the pavement. Then I see it, a single line of that fluid trailing from the front quarter panel to the driver's side door. He tried to open my door. That thing, whatever it was, had been right there, inches from me at the stop sign. The next morning, I give the number to my uncle, a police captain a few towns over. He runs it through the system and comes back with nothing. "Burner phone," he says. "Paid in cash, untraceable. It's off now." I don't tell him about the fluid, the tissue, the eyes. I don't tell anyone. I sleep with the lights on now, every creak in my apartment sending my heart racing. The woods around Open Space feel alive, watching, waiting. And somewhere out there, I know that thing is still lurking, its black eyes burning in the dark. Deep in the Ozark woods, where the air hums with secrets and the shadows seem to breathe, I stood alone, armed with new gear and a reckless curiosity. What I didn't know was that something ancient, something monstrous, was watching me. Its stench creeping closer, its eyes burning through the dusk. This is the story of how I survived the creature that haunts Arkansas's wild heart. I was 23, a restless soul, tromping through the tangled wilderness of Arkansas's Ozark Mountains, my boots crunching against the brittle leaves of late summer. Months of saving had finally paid off a fresh pair of tactical boots, a heavy-duty vest stuffed with pouches, and a mil-spec gas mask that made me feel invincible, like a soldier stepping into a post-apocalyptic dream. It was my personal Christmas, a chance to test my gear, and a few homemade prototypes I'd been tinkering with in my garage. My Nugget, a compact handgun, hung at my side. It wouldn't stop a grizzly, but it could send a snake, stray dog, or cougar running for cover. My vest sagged with rolled-up targets, 2 custom clipazines I'd built from scratch, a compass, a topographic map, a thermal blanket, spare underwear, MREs, a canteen, and a camelback. I was a one-man army, ready for anything: alien invasion, zombie horde, or just a long weekend in the woods. The forest buzzed with life as I roamed the sun, filtering through the canopy in golden slants. I played with the gas mask's field of view, tilting my head to test its weight, its clarity. The clipazines fed smoothly into my Nugget, each click of metal a small victory. I was in my element, grinning like a kid as I darted between trees, testing my gear's limits. By mid-afternoon, I found myself beside a dry creek bed, its cracked earth stretching like a scar through the forest. Late summer had drained the stream, leaving only dust and pebbles. Perfect for practicing guerrilla tactics, I thought. My gear was safe from water, though my own sweat was another story, soaking my shirt and dripping into my eyes. I triple-checked my Nugget's safety, then launched into a series of low slides and uphill sprints, my vest bouncing against my chest. The mask fogged slightly with my breath, but I pushed through heart-pounding muscles, burning. I was a survivalist, a predator in my own right, until I wasn't. Panting, I stopped in the creek bed, my lungs screaming for air. I peeled the mask down to my neck and gulped the humid forest air, letting the world steady around me. Time to get my bearings. I unfolded my topographic map, its creases worn from use, and aligned my compass, tracing a path back to my dad's cabin. The sun was dipping lower, painting the trees in shades of amber and rust. That's when it hit me, a smell. At first, I thought it was my own sweat, ripe from hours of exertion. But this was different, darker a stench that clawed its way into my nose and lodged there. It started as a faint whiff of rot, like meat left too long in the sun, then deepened into a sickening blend of animal musk, raw garbage, and something sharper, garlic, maybe mixed with the rancid bite of skunk and onion sludge. My stomach churned bile, rising in my throat. This wasn't natural. Something was wrong. Instinct kicked in. I popped an Adderall from my pouch, the bitter pill dissolving on my tongue, sharpening my focus. I yanked the clipazine from my nugget, checking it for jams. It was fine, but I swapped it for a fresh one anyway. No chances. The smell grew stronger. A living thing, wrapping around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I gagged, nearly vomiting up the Adderall. Desperate, I pulled the gas mask over my face, the rubber sealing against my skin. It helped, but not enough. The mask wasn't airtight, and tendrils of the stench slipped through, stinging my eyes. I moved cautiously along the creek bed, my boots silent against the dry earth, heading toward a shallow slope. Above me, the forest was alive with sounds, twigs snapping, leaves crunching, and a low, wet snuffling, like a hog rooting through mud. Whatever it was big. Too big for my nugget. My mind raced to my dad's stories about the Ozark big bears, monsters born from a botched wildlife experiment. My dad, a grizzled 58-year veteran of these mountains, had seen things that shook him to his core. Fatherhood was one. The big bears were the other. He'd told me how in the 40s and 50s, black bears were hunted nearly to extinction in the Ozarks. To fix it, the Arkansas Fish and Game Commission, along with the ANRC and NRCS, released 250 bears into the region. Their website swore they were all black bears. Dad called that a lie. He claimed some were brown bears, and when they bred with the local population, their offspring, amped up by hybrid vigor, grew bigger, meaner, and more fertile than anything the forest had seen before. He'd shown me proof once, a manila folder labeled BB, stuffed with shaky Polaroids. In one, a massive black and brown creature rooted near a clothes line, its shoulder brushing just below the line, which hung 5 or 6 feet off the ground. Another showed it rummaging through trash barely hidden by trees. The details were blurry, but the size was undeniable. Dad's rules for surviving a big bear were burned into my brain. They're dumb as hell, which makes them dangerous. They don't fear humans. They smell like death, so you'll know they're coming. If you smell one, get inside, get upstairs, and grab a 12 gauge with deer slugs. If you're stuck outside, climb a tree. They're faster than you. so don't run." I'd laughed off his warnings, chalking them up to old man paranoia. But now, standing in that creek bed, the stench choking me, I wasn't laughing. The sounds above grew louder. Grunts, sloppy crunches, and that relentless snuffling. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. Big bear, maybe rabid. The light was fading fast, the forest sinking into a twilight haze. Staying in the creek bed wasn't an option. I couldn't risk being trapped after dark with whatever this was. I scrambled up the opposite bank, my boots slipping on loose rocks. Halfway up, I leaned against the slope, catching my breath. That's when I saw it. It wasn't a bear. My eyes locked onto the thing, and time seemed to slow, every detail searing into my brain. It was bear-like, sure, but wrong in every way. Its body was a hulking mass, like a furry blimp covered in matted, charcoal-black fur, streaked with dark brown. Its shoulders were angular, unnaturally high, and its feet, God, its feet, were like manhole covers, flattening the earth with every step. The snout was long, almost trunk-like, jutting from a face that looked like a nightmare hybrid of grisly sloth and something pulled from a sci-fi horror flick. I'd read Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials as a kid, and my nerd brain screamed, Sasquatch Solidor, anything but real. But this was real, and it was here, shuffling through the underbrush, oblivious to me, for 2.5 minutes. I stared, my breath shallow, my body rooted to the spot. The creature's fur was clumped with dirt, its movements slow and uncoordinated, like it was too dumb to notice the world around it. Relief flickered in my chest. If it hadn't seen me yet, I could slip away. Then it happened. My stomach clenched, and a loud, humiliating fart ripped through the silence, echoing off the trees. The creature stopped. My heart stopped. The forest went deathly quiet, save for the fading echo of my own betrayal. It turned. Its head swiveled, slow and deliberate, its eyes small, glinting, and far too human, locking onto mine. It sniffed the air, its snout twitching, and then it stood. I'd thought its shoulder blades were high before, but now I realized they were its elbows. It had been crouching this whole time, and now upright, it towered over the creek bed, its paws like trash can lids, its body a wall of muscle and filth. It barked a wet, guttural sound that might have been a question. Gorp. I swear that's what it sounded like. Gorp. Panic surged through me, but the Adderall kept my hand steady. I raised my nugget, aiming center mass, and fired. The shot hit a puff of dirt and hair exploding from its chest. It flinched, actually flinched, but no blood. Its matted fur was like armor deflecting the bullet. I worked the bolt, fired again this time, at its face. The bullet grazed its skull, ricocheting into the dirt. The creature didn't even blink. It just stared, its eyes, dull, like it was too stupid to know it should be dead. My colon clenched fear, turning my insides to liquid. I fired a third shot, wild, screaming at it to back off. The gorp dropped to all fours, lurching toward me, its stench a physical force now burning my throat. I turned and ran my gear, rattling my mask, fogging with frantic breaths. Branches snapped behind me, the gorp's grunts echoing through the trees. I didn't look back. I sprinted until the sky bled orange, then blue, my legs burning, my lungs screaming. When I finally stopped, the forest was silent. No grunts, no stench. Just me alone, shaking. I made it back to my dad's cabin after dark, my clothes reeking of sweat and something fouler. I told him everything, expecting him to call me crazy. Instead, he went pale, locked the doors, and camped upstairs for the rest of my visit, a 12-gauge across his lap. He refused to believe the gorp wasn't a bear, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew something was out there. The weird thing, I wasn't scared. Not really. The Adderall, maybe, or my own curiosity, kept the fear at bay. I'd seen something impossible, something that didn't belong in this world, and I'd survived. If I'd bolted blindly, I'd probably be a pile of gorp dung by now. Instead, I'm here typing this, wondering what else is hiding in the Ozarks, and wondering if it's still out there, sniffing the air, waiting for me to fart again. It was early November 2024, and I had just settled into my new life in Washington State. The move from my home state, where flat plains and sparse trees dominated, to the lush, endless forests of the Pacific Northwest, felt like stepping into another world. The towering evergreens, the crisp air, and the sense of untamed wilderness captivated me. I'd always loved the outdoors, but the woods here were something else, wild, ancient, and brimming with secrets. So when a group of new friends, all seasoned woodsmen, invited me to join them for a camping trip near the Canadian border, I didn't hesitate. What the hell, I thought. I could use a break from work, and this sounds like the perfect way to dive into the local scene. My friends, Greg, Victor, Tom, Mike, and Sarah, were the kind of people who lived for the wilderness. They knew every trail, every trick to survive in the backcountry, and they had a passion for hunting and camping that bordered on obsession. Greg, the unofficial leader, was a burly guy with a quick laugh and a penchant for storytelling. Victor was quieter, methodical, always checking his gear twice. Tom was the Joker, always ready with a quip or a prank. Mike was the outdoors purist, the one who could start a fire with nothing but a flint and sheer willpower. And Sarah, the only woman in the group, was tougher than most, with a sharp wit and a no-nonsense attitude. They'd been camping together for years, and I was the newbie, eager to prove I could keep up. We planned to head out on a Friday evening, taking advantage of a long weekend. I packed my bag with essentials, warm clothes, a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a few MREs. I also cleaned my hunting rifle, a reliable .308 I'd inherited from my dad. It was more for peace of mind than anything else. I wasn't much of a hunter, but the others insisted on being armed. "You never know what's out there," Greg had said with a grin, though his eyes held a flicker of something serious. Each of them carried a rifle or shotgun, plus a handgun for backup. I stuck with my rifle, figuring it was enough. We piled into 2 trucks and drove north from Bellingham, the road winding through dense forests and past small towns that felt like they belonged in another era. The closer we got to the Canadian border, the more isolated it felt. The radio started crackling, losing signal, and soon it was just us, the hum of the engines, and the occasional bark from the 2 dogs riding with us, a Labrador named Rusty and a Rottweiler named Max. Rusty was Greg's dog, a friendly goofball who loved chasing sticks. Max, Victor's dog, was all business, with a low growl that could make anyone think twice. After about an hour, we turned onto a narrow dirt road, barely wide enough for the trucks. Greg explained it was used by game wardens and border patrol, but this time of year, it was deserted. The plan was to hike a few miles into the forest and set up camp in a secluded spot they'd used before. "It's perfect," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "No people, no noise, just the woods and us." I nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. My home state had woods, but nothing like this. The forest here seemed to stretch on forever, a sea of dark green that swallowed the horizon. We parked the trucks at a small clearing, grabbed our gear, and started hiking. The trail was faint, more of a suggestion than a path, and the air grew colder as we moved deeper into the woods. The dogs bounded ahead, sniffing everything, while we followed our breath, visible in the November chill. It was late afternoon, and the sun was already dipping low, casting long shadows through the trees. After about 4 miles, Greg called a halt. "This is it," he said, pointing to a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. It was beautiful in a stark, primal way, but there was something about it, an odd stillness that made the hair on my neck prickle. By the time we reached the clearing, dusk was settling in, and the temperature was dropping fast. We decided to get a fire going and set up the tents before it got too dark. The group split up. Mike, Sarah, and Rusty went to gather firewood, while Greg, Victor, Tom, and I started on the tents. We had 2 large tents, each meant for 6 to 8 people, sturdy enough to handle the cold. I was impressed by how quickly we got them up, 15 minutes tops. But as we finished, I noticed Mike and Sarah hadn't returned. "They're taking their sweet time," Greg muttered, glancing toward the woods. "Screw it," Victor said. "Let's get the fire going with what we've got." We gathered some branches and kindling from around the site, and soon had a small blaze crackling. The warmth was a relief, but the darkness was creeping in fast, and the forest felt heavier, like it was watching us. Max, the Rottweiler, stayed close. His ears perked occasionally, letting out a low growl. I chalked it up to him being protective, but it didn't help my growing unease. Then we heard it crashing noises, like someone sprinting through the underbrush, coming straight toward us. My heart jumped, and I grabbed my rifle. Greg and Victor did the same, their faces tense. Out of the shadows burst Mike and Sarah, wide-eyed and breathless, without Rusty. Max started barking furiously, hackles raised. "What the hell happened?" Greg demanded. Mike was panting, his words tumbling out. "We saw Tom out there, acting weird as hell. We tried to get close, but he kept moving away, like he didn't want us near him. Then he just vanished. Poof, gone. And then he popped up, not 10 feet behind us, staring." Sarah nodded, her face pale. There was this smell, too, like rotten meat and spoiled milk, so bad it made my eyes water. We called out to him, but he didn't answer. Then he took off sprinting into the woods like a damn Olympian. "And Rusty?" I asked, my stomach sinking. Mike's voice cracked. "He went after Tom, barking like crazy. We tried to follow, but we lost them both. Then we heard this screech, like nothing I've ever heard. And Rusty yelped loud. The smell got worse, and there was this giggling, like someone was laughing, but all wrong. We got the hell out of there." The story didn't add up. Tom was right here with us, helping with the tents. "You sure it was Tom?" I asked, looking at him. He shrugged, looking as confused as the rest of us. "I've been here the whole time," he said. Greg and Victor backed him up, but Mike and Sarah were adamant. It was him, Sarah insisted. Same jacket, same build. But he didn't act like Tom. The group fell silent. The crackle of the fire, the only sound. I tried to laugh it off. "Sounds like a prank gone wrong. Tom's probably messing with you." That got me a few glares, and Mike snapped, "Then where's Rusty?" I didn't have an answer. The sun was gone now, the forest pitch black beyond the firelight. We built the fire higher and set up Coleman lanterns around the camp, their harsh glow pushing back the darkness. We sat around the fire, eating MREs, our guns within reach. The mood was tense, everyone on edge. Max suddenly perked up, his growl deep and menacing, staring into the woods. That smell hit us again so foul, it made my stomach churn. Then came the noises, groaning low and guttural, mixed with the crunch of leaves and snapping branches. It was circling us just beyond the light. Max went berserk, barking and lunging toward the darkness. Greg stood shotgun in hand. "Enough of this crap," he shouted, and fired 3 rounds of buckshot into the trees. The sound was deafening, followed by a blood-curdling screech that tore through the night, retreating fast. The smell faded, and the noises stopped. We sat there, hearts pounding, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. After an hour, we decided to try to sleep, setting up a watch schedule. Victor and I took the first shift, sitting by the fire with Max, who was finally calming down. The forest was quiet now, but the silence felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. 2 hours passed without incident, and we woke Greg and Tom for their turn. I crawled into my sleeping bag, exhausted, but wired the events of the night replaying in my mind. I don't know how long I slept before I was jolted awake by Greg yelling. The smell was back, worse than before, and Greg was outside the tent, shining a spotlight into the woods, shouting Tom's name. I scrambled out, grabbing my rifle. "What's going on?" I asked. Greg's face was grim. "Tom's gone." We were sitting by the fire when we heard someone calling from the woods. Sounded like Mike. Max started growling, then took off toward the sound. Tom went after him, and I lost them both in the bushes. He'd been calling for Tom when he heard him start to say something, only to be cut off mid-sentence. "We can't leave them out there," Sarah said, already pulling on her boots. We all agreed, though, the smell was making us gag. Armed with flashlights, spotlights, and our guns, we headed into the woods, following Tom's tracks. The forest was suffocatingly dark, the trees closing in around us. We found his footprints, but they stopped abruptly. No sign of where he'd gone. It was like he'd been plucked off the ground, one of the group. Mike, I think, stopped suddenly, his light fixed on something ahead. "You freaking jerk," he yelled. "We've been worried, sick." We turned to look, and there was Tom, standing about 20 feet away. But something was wrong. His posture was off, like his joints didn't quite fit together. "You okay, buddy?" Victor called. "Need help?" Tom nodded slowly, his face blank. We approached cautiously, and I noticed he reeked, Not just of the rotten smell, but something deeper, like decay. His clothes were filthy torn, which made no sense. He'd only been out here a few hours. We supported him back to camp, his movements stiff and jerky. He refused to lie down sitting by the fire, instead staring into the flames. Greg, Victor, and I decided to stay up, keeping an eye on him. He was quiet, barely responding, and every so often, his body would twitch like a puppet with half its strings cut. When we offered him an MRE, he tore into it, eating only the meat, ignoring everything else. It was unsettling, but we figured he was just shaken up. Then he stood his movements sharp and unnatural, and asked in a flat voice, "Wanna come into the woods? Need firewood?" It was a bizarre request. We had plenty of wood, and it was the middle of the night. He shrugged, or at least tried to, before walking into the darkness, his gait uneven, like he was learning to move. Greg stepped into the tent for a moment, leaving Victor and me outside. The smell hit again so strong, I gagged, followed by a sound gibbering like laughter, but warped, mixed with high-pitched giggles. It was coming from the woods circling us. Victor's face was pale, his knuckles white around his shotgun. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. Greg burst out of the tent, cursing loudly enough to wake the others. "Get up now," he shouted. We gathered around, confused, as he explained. While inside, he'd counted the sleeping bags, 4 bodies, not 3. Something had been in the tent with them unnoticed until now. The realization hit like a punch. "Where's Tom?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. The gibbering grew louder, and Tom's voice called from the woods. "Come help me." But it was wrong. Off-key, punctuated by that eerie giggling. We didn't move. Instead, we built the fire as high as it would go, turned every lantern to full brightness, and sat with our weapons ready, eyes on the darkness. The noises continued circling, taunting, until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. As soon as we could see, we extinguished the fire, packed our gear, and made for the trucks. The smell returned, accompanied by the giggling closer now. We moved fast, not looking back. When we reached the clearing, our trucks were a mess, scratched windows, smashed seats, torn apart. But they started, thank God. We threw our stuff in, piled inside, and sped away, the forest shrinking in the rearview mirror. We didn't talk about it for months. Most of us pretended it never happened, burying the fear and confusion. But one day, Mike pulled me aside. "I saw Tom," he said, his voice low. As we were leaving, he was at the edge of the woods, watching us. He had this grin, like nothing I've ever seen. It wasn't human. I believed him. I don't know what we encountered out there. Skinwalkers, wendigos, or something else entirely. But I know I'll never camp that deep in the woods again, not without an army. The forest keeps its secrets, and some are better left buried. It was the summer of 2013, and the idea of hunting coyotes had been gnawing at me for months. Their pelts fetched a decent price, and I figured I could make a quick buck while indulging my love for the outdoors. I wasn't some seasoned hunter with a trophy room. I was just a guy with a cheap AR-15 I'd picked up at a gun show for a steal. It was bare bones, nothing fancy, no optics, no custom grips, just a reliable tool for the job. I'd always admired the way an AK-47 slung across the chest, so I rigged a sling point to the barrel of my rifle, looping it messenger bag style around my neck and right shoulder. It felt tactical, like I was ready for anything. I loaded my gear onto my old ATV, a beat-up machine that growled like a chainsaw, but never let me down. My destination was a small cabin I rented on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, a place where the air smelled of pine and the stars burned bright enough to make you forget the world below. The cabin was basic, a single room with a creaky porch, a wood stove, and a cot that sagged in the middle. It was my escape, a place to drink cheap whiskey and pretend I was some rugged frontiersman. The plan was simple. For weeks, I'd been tossing squirrel and rabbit guts into the woods behind the cabin, hoping to lure in coyotes or maybe a fox. Predators couldn't resist the stench of fresh carrion, and I figured it was only a matter of time before they showed up. I drove the ATV up the winding dirt trail, the engine's rumble echoing off the rocky cliffs. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. By the time I reached the cabin, dusk had settled, and the mountain felt alive with the hum of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. I parked the ATV, pocketed the key, and took a moment to breathe in the cool air. The woods were quiet, but there was a weight to the silence, like the forest was holding its breath. I grabbed my rifle and checked the bait pile, a grisly mess of entrails hidden in a clearing about 50 yards from the cabin. To my surprise, it was gone, every last scrap. Not a bone or a shred of fur remained. Coyotes were thorough, but this felt different, almost deliberate. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine, but I shook it off. Probably just a hungry pack, I told myself. As I stood there, I noticed a car peeling out from the neighbor's place down the road. It was Tom, the only other soul who lived up here year-round. He was a gruff old guy, a retired logger who kept to himself, but always had a story about the mountain's quirks. bears, mountain lions, even the occasional hiker who wandered too far and never came back. His taillights disappeared into the dusk, leaving me alone. I decided to scout the woods just to be sure nothing was lurking. The forest was dense, a tangle of pine and underbrush that swallowed the fading light. Each step I took sent a crunch through the dry grass, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my footsteps weren't the only ones. There was a faint rustle, a whisper of movement in the brush, always just out of sight. I stopped, heart pounding, and scanned the trees. That's when I saw it. A stick figure shape, tall and thin, maybe 100 yards down the hill. It stood motionless, half hidden by a cluster of pines. I raised a hand, giving a hesitant wave, thinking it might be a hiker. The figure slipped behind a tree, vanishing like smoke. My stomach twisted. "Okay, goodbye," I muttered, turning back toward the cabin. Back on the porch, I cracked open a beer and tried to laugh off the jitters. The mountain could play tricks on you shadows, wind your own imagination. I sat there as night fell, the darkness wrapping around the cabin like a blanket. The coyotes started up in the distance, their yips and howls cutting through the silence. It was a familiar sound, but tonight it felt closer, more insistent. I grabbed my rifle, checked the magazine, and settled into a chair with the porch lights off. If those coyotes came sniffing around, I'd be ready to drop a few. The yelping went on for an hour, maybe two, but nothing showed. I was about to call it a night when the coyote calls shifted. They grew sharper, more desperate, and then, impossibly, they morphed into something else. "Help me," a voice cried, faint but clear, coming from the woods. I froze my beer halfway to my lips. The voice came again, louder this time. "Help me." It sounded human, but wrong, like someone mimicking a plea they'd heard, but didn't understand. I glanced at Tom's house. The windows were dark, and it hit me he'd left earlier. There was no one else up here. My mind raced. Maybe he'd come back and gotten hurt. Maybe he'd broken a leg or gotten pinned under his own ATV. Coyotes could be bold, especially if they smelled blood. I grabbed my rifle, slung it over my shoulder, and hopped on the ATV, the engine roaring to life. The voice kept calling, guiding me down an old trail that snaked through the woods. The trail was rough, rutted, from years of rain and neglect. I followed the cries, my headlights slicing through the dark. The voice grew louder, more frantic, until it was right ahead. The trail dipped into a U-shaped gully, and I eased off the throttle, letting the ATV coast down. That's when it screamed, Help me so close. It felt like it was in my ear. My nerves snapped. I jerked the handlebars, and the ATV lurched, flipping over with a sickening crunch. The world spun, and then nothing. I came to under the ATV, the weight of it pinning my left leg. My head throbbed, and my arm was slick with blood. The sling around my neck told me my rifle was still there, and I dragged it to me, wincing as pain shot through my shoulder. The handguard was bent, the stock cracked, but the action seemed intact. 30 rounds. That's what I had to get through the night. The forest was silent now, a suffocating quiet that pressed against my ears. I lay there, heart hammering, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the dark. Then I heard it, a shuffle in the grass, slow and deliberate. My skin prickled. The shuffling stopped, then started again, closer. "Help me," the voice whispered, inches away. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Something loomed over the ATV, a shadow that seemed to stretch forever. It was tall, impossibly tall, with a skeletal frame and eyes that gleamed like oil in the moonlight. Fear choked me. My fingers fumbled for the rifle, pulling it to my shoulder. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't help it. Its face was a nightmare, sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, a mouth that gaped like a wound. Its breath hit me a stench like rotting meat and sulfur. "Help me," it said, again climbing over the ATV. I screamed, and it screamed back, a sound that tore through my skull. My finger found the trigger, and I fired the AR, barking in my hands. The muzzle flash lit up the night, and my ears rang like a bell. It lunged, grabbing my hair and slamming my head into the ground. I kept firing the rifle, bucking against my shoulder. It ripped the gun from my hands and swung it like a club, the cracked stock smashing into my skull. Stars exploded in my vision. I was fading, the world slipping away, when a new sound cut through the chaos, a deafening boom, louder than thunder. The thing's head jerked, and it collapsed its weight, crashing onto the ATV. I scrambled free, dropping the rifle and running blindly. Lights flickered through the trees, and someone shouted my name. "Hold on." It was Tom, his voice a lifeline. I stumbled toward him, my legs barely working. He grabbed my arm, his face pale in the glow of his flashlight. In his other hand was a massive revolver, a Magnum Research BFR, its barrel still smoking. I tried to speak, but the world tilted, and I blacked out. I woke up in a hospital, my head wrapped in bandages and stitches pulling at my scalp. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Concussion fractured ribs, a gash on my arm that needed 20 staples. When I finally saw Tom, I asked him what he'd seen that night. He looked me in the eye, his face unreadable. "A bear," he said. "We get 'em up here sometimes." I didn't argue, but I knew better. Bears don't mimic human voices. Bears don't wield rifles like weapons. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't a bear. I never went back to the cabin, and I sold the AR-15. The mountain can keep its secrets. Hey, Joel. I've been a fan of your stories for years, always marveling at how you weave terror and humanity into tales that linger long after the last word. I never thought I'd have a story worth telling. Nothing in my life ever seemed scary enough to warrant it. But last year, a fleeting childhood memory bubbled up, one I hadn't thought about in decades. It was a Thanksgiving from when I was 8, back in 1993. And when I asked my mom about it, her face froze in a way I'd never seen before. That's when I realized my hazy, happy recollection was just the surface of something much darker. What I thought was a quirky holiday tradition turned out to be a night of terror my family had buried deep. Here's my version of the story, pieced together from my memories, and the chilling truth my parents finally shared. Back in 1993, I was a scrawny 8-year-old with a love for hockey and a knack for getting into mischief with my cousins. Thanksgiving that year meant a long drive across the state to my aunt and uncle's house on my mom's side. My mom and her sister, Aunt Linda, were thick as thieves, and our families spent most holidays together. Their house was a sprawling 2-story with creaky floors and a big backyard, perfect for roughhousing. My cousins Tommy, who was my age, and Sarah, a year younger, were my partners in crime. We'd spend hours inventing games, from pretend pirate battles to sneaking extra cookies from the kitchen. That Thanksgiving, the drive felt endless, but the promise of playing with my cousins kept me buzzing with excitement. When we arrived, the house smelled like roasted turkey, pumpkin pie, and that warm, buttery scent of fresh rolls. Aunt Linda and my mom were already in the kitchen, laughing and clinking wine glasses, while my Uncle Dave and my dad Mark were setting up the dining table. The adults were in high spirits, and us kids were tearing through the house, chasing each other with plastic swords, until Mom's voice cut through the chaos. "Dinner's ready. Wash your hands." We gathered around the kids' table, right next to the adults' table in the dining room. The spread was a feast: golden turkey, creamy mashed potatoes, green beans with crispy onions, and cranberry sauce that jiggled on the plate. I piled my plate high, sneaking extra stuffing when Mom wasn't looking. The adults were chatting and passing dishes, the room filled with the hum of family togetherness. But then something shifted. I didn't notice it at the time, Kids don't pick up on adult tension, but looking back, I realize the air changed. Out of nowhere, Mom and Aunt Linda stood up, their faces tight with forced smiles. Kids. Mom said, her voice a little too bright. We're going to do something special this year. We're eating upstairs in Aunt Linda and Uncle Dave's bedroom. And guess what? Anyone who eats their turkey up there gets to watch the Mighty Ducks on the big TV. My cousins and I froze, forks halfway to our mouths. The Mighty Ducks on the big TV. That was the holy grail of kid entertainment. We didn't need convincing. We grabbed our plates, nearly tripping over each other, to race upstairs. I vaguely remember grumbling about not wanting to eat on the floor, but the promise of Emilio Estevez and hockey glory drowned out any complaints. Upstairs, Mom spread a big quilt on the floor of Aunt Linda and Uncle Dave's bedroom. The room was cozy, with a massive oak bed, a dresser covered in family photos, and a TV perched on a stand. She set our plates down, and we plopped onto the quilt, giggling and shoving food in our faces. Mom stayed with us, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her eyes darting to the door every few minutes. She didn't eat, which I didn't think was weird at the time. She was probably just full from cooking, I figured. Whenever we needed something more, juice, a napkin, or a bathroom break, Mom was on it. She'd walk us to the bathroom and back her hand gripping ours a little too tightly. If we asked to go downstairs for anything, she'd say, "Stay here, sweetie. I'll get it." She'd disappear for a moment and return with whatever we wanted, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. I didn't question it. I was too busy quoting lines from the Mighty Ducks and arguing with Tommy over who'd be Gordon Bombay if we played hockey. After dinner, we got dessert, pumpkin pie with whipped cream, and kept watching movies. Mom put on Home Alone, and we laughed until our sides hurt. By the time we started yawning, the quilt was a mess of crumbs and spilled juice. We curled up on Aunt Linda and Uncle Dave's bed, the three of us squished together like puppies, and fell asleep to the flicker of the TV. The next morning, we drove home, and I remember thinking it was the best Thanksgiving ever. We'd gotten to eat in front of the TV, watch movies all night, and sleep in a giant bed. I even asked Mom if we could do it again next year, but she just said, "Maybe, honey," and changed the subject. For years, that's all I remembered, a magical, rule-breaking Thanksgiving that felt like a one-time adventure. It wasn't until last year, when I was 38, and chatting with my dad over coffee, that I brought it up. "Hey, Dad," I said, "remember that Thanksgiving when we ate upstairs at Aunt Linda's? Why'd we do that?" Just once, I expected a nostalgic chuckle, maybe a story about Mom and Linda being spontaneous. Instead, his face changed. His usual expressions calm, but ready to scold outright mad, or grinning over a football win, were gone. What I saw was fear raw and unmistakable. My stomach dropped. Whatever I'd stumbled into it wasn't a funny memory. Dad leaned back in his chair, his coffee mug trembling slightly in his hand. He glanced around like he was checking for eavesdroppers and said, "Don't tell your mom I told you this." Then he took a deep breath and told me the real story, the grown-ups version of that Thanksgiving night. According to Dad, everything started out as I remembered the drive, the warm welcome, the chaotic joy of family. Dinner was in full swing, the adults laughing over old stories, while us kids made a mess at our table. But then the phone rang a shrill interruption in the cozy dining room. Uncle Dave got up to answer it, assuming it was a neighbor or a relative calling to wish them well. He listened for a moment, then called out, "Linda, it's for you." Aunt Linda wiped her hands on a napkin and took the phone, her brow furrowing as she listened. She was gone for a minute or two, and when she returned, she was different. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced by a quiet tension. She sat down, but didn't touch her food, her fork resting limply in her hand. Uncle Dave noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice low. "It's fine," she said quickly. "Just someone from work." But her tone was off, and Dad said he saw Uncle Dave's jaw tighten. He didn't press her, but the mood at the table shifted. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, sensing something was wrong, but not sure what. A few minutes later, headlights swept across the dining room windows, cutting through the November dusk. A car was pulling into the driveway. The adults froze their forks, hovering over their plates. It was Thanksgiving. Unexpected guests weren't unheard of. Maybe a cousin had decided to drop by, or a neighbor was bringing pie. But Dad said Aunt Linda's reaction was something else entirely. The color drained from her face, her eyes wide with something close to panic. Uncle Dave started to stand, but Linda grabbed his arm, her knuckles white. She leaned in and whispered 3 words that made his face mirror hers. "Get your gun." Mom and Dad were stunned. "What the hell's going on?" Dad asked, but there was no time for answers. Aunt Linda turned to Mom and said, "Get the kids upstairs. Now." Her voice was sharp, urgent. Mom didn't hesitate. She rounded us up, herding us toward the stairs with that forced cheer about the mighty ducks. I didn't notice the fear in her eyes then, but Dad said she was shaking as she led us away. While Mom kept us distracted upstairs, the adults downstairs were facing a nightmare. Aunt Linda quickly told Dad and Uncle Dave the bare minimum the man on the phone was her ex-husband, a ghost from a past she thought she'd escaped. She didn't have time to explain more, but she said he was dangerous, and they needed to be ready. Uncle Dave grabbed his .45 from the gun safe, his hand steady, but his face pale. Dad, unarmed and unprepared, felt his heart pounding. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew he'd do whatever it took to protect us, the three of them. Uncle Dave, Aunt Linda, and Dad moved toward the front door. The car's headlights were blinding, casting long shadows across the porch. Uncle Dave stepped outside the .45, gripped tightly with Dad and Linda close behind. The security light flickered on, illuminating a beat-up sedan in the driveway. A man was standing behind the open trunk, his silhouette swaying slightly. Uncle Dave called out, "Who are you?" "Identify yourself." The man stepped out from behind the car, and Dad's blood ran cold. He was holding a pistol, his grip unsteady. Aunt Linda let out a choked scream and bolted back inside, slamming the door. Dad said he was paralyzed, his mind racing. If this guy shot Uncle Dave, Dad would have to charge him, try to tackle him before he could get to the house where we were upstairs. He couldn't let some maniac near his kids, but then Dad noticed something. The man was drunk. Not just tipsy, but stumbling, barely able to stand. His gun wavered in his hand, like he didn't know how to hold it. "Uncle Dave." His voice steady, despite his fear, shouted, "Point that thing at me, and I'll kill you." The man fumbled his fingers, slipping on the slide. Dad later learned the gun wasn't even loaded properly. The guy was too wasted to chamber a round. Uncle Dave closed the distance, his .45 raised. The man looked up, his eyes bleary, and before he could react, Uncle Dave swung the butt of his gun, connecting with the man's temple. He crumpled to the ground, the pistol clattering onto the gravel. Dad rushed forward, kicking the gun away, then helped Uncle Dave drag the man away from the car. They didn't take any chances, pinning him down until he stirred groaning, but too disoriented to fight. Dad glanced at the car's open trunk and saw something that made his stomach lurch. 2 red gas cans, their caps loosely screwed on. The smell of gasoline wafted up, mingling with the cold night air. This wasn't just a drunken confrontation. This man had come with a plan. They sat on the guy, more like sat near him, since he was barely conscious until the sheriff's deputies arrived, their lights flashing in the distance. The deputies cuffed him, hauled him into the back of a cruiser, and took him away. Dad said the relief was overwhelming, but the fear didn't vanish. They still didn't know the full story, and Aunt Linda's reaction told them there was more to come. Once the deputies left, the adults gathered in the living room, their voices low. so we wouldn't hear upstairs. Mom came down briefly, her face pale, and Aunt Linda finally told them the truth. She'd never spoken about her ex-husband, not even to Uncle Dave. His name was Carl, and she'd married him young, too naive to see the red flags. He wasn't violent, not in the physical sense, but he was controlling in ways that left deeper scars. He'd isolated her, cut her off from friends, and controlled their finances. She didn't have a job, a bank account, or even a phone in the house. When she tried to leave, he'd sabotage her, emptying the fridge, locking her out, or worse, leaving her stranded with no money. One night, after months of torment, Carl threw out all the food in the house and left her alone. Linda, humiliated and desperate, scrounged change from the street to call her mother, my grandma, from a payphone. Grandma drove through the night to rescue her, and Linda swore her to secrecy. She was ashamed, blaming herself for being stupid enough to fall for Carl's charm. She fled to Chicago, rebuilt her life, and met Uncle Dave, a kind man who gave her the stability she'd never had. She thought Carl was gone forever, a bad memory she'd buried. But that Thanksgiving, he'd found her. The phone call was him slurring threats, saying he was coming to take back what's mine. Linda hadn't heard from him in over a decade, but his voice brought back every moment of fear and helplessness. When she saw his car in the driveway, she knew he wasn't there to talk. The gas cans in his trunk confirmed her worst fears. He'd planned to kill them all and burn the house down. The police later told them Carl had been spiraling for years, fueled by alcohol and obsession. He'd tracked Linda down through old contacts, piecing together her new life. His plan was deranged, but his drunkenness had saved them. He went to prison, though not for long enough, and the judge issued a restraining order. If he ever set foot in town again, he'd be arrested on sight. Upstairs, we kids were blissfully unaware, laughing at Kevin's uncle eating pizza, while Mom and Aunt Linda kept us cocooned in normalcy. They came in to say goodnight, their faces calm, betraying none of the horror they'd just faced. Looking back, I'm amazed at their strength, how they shielded us from a truth that could have shattered our world. Now, 30 years later, my parents and Aunt Linda are in their 70s. Carl, if he's still alive, would be too. Everyone assumes he's moved on that age, and time have dulled his obsession. But to me, it feels more like hope than certainty. The idea that he could still be out there nursing a grudge keeps me up at night. It's like a blade hanging over our family, waiting to drop. I think about Aunt Linda, how she rebuilt her life, only to have her past crash into it, like a wrecking ball. I think about my mom, keeping us safe upstairs, while her heart raced with fear. And I think about Dad and Uncle Dave, ordinary men who faced down a gun to protect us. That Thanksgiving wasn't just a holiday. It was a battle one we won, but never celebrated. The scariest part. This story isn't over. It won't be until Carl is gone for good. I pray it ends with him fading into obscurity, not with another night of terror. Because God knows I don't want anyone else to die. About a decade ago, I welcomed my first ever dog into my life, a tiny toy poodle puppy named Luna. She was an adorable bundle of curly fur with big, curious eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. Luna wasn't just cute. She was whip-smart, quickly figuring out how to charm her way into people's hearts and their snacks. She had a knack for spotting her best targets. Little kids who squealed at her fluffiness, elderly ladies who cooed over her dainty paws, and anyone decked out in pink or sparkly outfits. They were powerless against her wagging tail and pleading gaze, often slipping her bits of their sandwiches or cookies. Luna knew she had them wrapped around her little paw. One sunny afternoon, disaster struck. I was vacuuming the house, the loud hum drowning out the world, when Luna saw her chance. The backyard gate, left slightly ajar after I'd brought in the groceries, was her ticket to freedom. By the time I noticed her absence, she was long gone. Panic set in. I grabbed her favorite squeaky toy and a handful of treats, hoping to lure her back, and started combing the neighborhood on foot. I called her name until my voice grew hoarse, peering into bushes under parked cars and behind fences. No sign of her. My heart sank as I realized she might have bolted the moment I turned on the vacuum, giving her a head start. Desperate, I hopped into my car, determined to cover more ground, driving slowly through the quiet streets. I leaned out the window, shouting, "Luna! Luna! Come here, girl!" I held my phone ready with her. Picture: a fluffy poodle, mid-prance, her tongue lolling out happily to show anyone who might have seen her. Neighbors walking their dogs or pushing strollers paused to listen as I described my missing puppy. Most shook their heads sympathetically, promising to keep an eye out. The longer I searched, the more my worry grew. Had she been picked up by someone? Was she scared, lost, or worse? As I turned onto a street lined with tidy lawns, I spotted a group of kids playing on the grass. Two girls, probably 5 or 6 years old, were engrossed in a Barbie doll adventure, their toys scattered around them. They heard my calls for Luna and perked up their eyes wide with curiosity. Abandoning their dolls, they ran toward my car, ponytails bouncing. What kind of puppy? Is she little? Is she fluffy? They chirped, their excitement palpable. I started to pull up Luna's picture on my phone to show them, but a wave of caution hit me. This was exactly the kind of scenario they warn kids about. In stranger danger talks, a random adult in a car engaging them with a story about a lost pet. I froze, unsure how to proceed without alarming them or their parents. Can you go get your mom or dad? I need to talk to them, I said, trying to sound calm and non-threatening. One girl nodded and dashed toward the house, her sneakers slapping the pavement. The other, bolder, or perhaps just more curious, stayed put. She stepped closer, gripping the edge of my open car window with her small hands. Is the puppy in your car? Can I see her? She asked, peering inside, as if Luna might be hiding on the passenger seat. My mind raced. I didn't want to scare her, but I also didn't want to be the creepy stranger in this situation. Just wait for your mom. Okay? I said, glancing nervously toward the house, willing an adult to appear. Seconds later, the front door flew open, and a woman, presumably the mom, came sprinting across the lawn, her face a mix of fear and fury. She scooped up the girl at my window, clutching her tightly, and shot me a look that could have melted steel. What's going on here? She demanded, her voice sharp. I stumbled over my words, trying to explain. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare anyone. My puppy Luna. She's a toy poodle. She escaped my yard, and I'm driving around looking for her. I held up my phone with Luna's picture and offered my name and number, hoping to seem less like a threat. If you see her, could you call me? She's small, white, and super friendly. The mom barely glanced at the photo. Her priority was clear. Get her kids away from the stranger in the car. She nodded curtly, still holding her daughter, and called to the other girl to follow her. Come on inside now, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The girls obeyed, casting curious glances back at me as their mom ushered them into the house. I sat there, my face burning with embarrassment. I hadn't meant to come off as creepy, but I could see how it looked, a grown man, alone in a car, talking to kids about a lost puppy. I drove off, feeling like the villain in a cautionary tale. The search continued for another agonizing hour. I circled the neighborhood, my hope fading with every empty street. Just as I was about to head home to make flyers, my phone buzzed. It was a neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who lived a few blocks away. Hey, I think I found your dog, he said, amusement in his voice. She's in my chicken coop, of all places. Relief flooded through me as I sped to his house, barely remembering to thank him over the phone. When I arrived, Mr. Thompson led me to his backyard. where his small flock of hens clucked indignantly. There, nestled in a straw-filled nesting box, was Luna. She was fast asleep, her white fur dusted with bits of straw, her tiny body curled up among a clutch of eggs. A broody hen, clearly unimpressed by her uninvited guest, was perched atop her, fluffing her feathers, as if claiming Luna as her own. Mr. Thompson chuckled as he gently shooed the hen away. Found her when I came to collect the eggs. She must have wandered in, made herself cozy, and passed out. This hen decided she was part of the brood. Luna stirred, blinking sleepily, then let out a joyous yip when she saw me. Her tail wagged furiously, sending straw flying. I scooped her up, laughing, despite the stress of the day. "You little troublemaker," I muttered, checking her for injuries. She was fine, just a bit eggy-smelling, and very pleased with her adventure. I thanked Mr. Thompson profusely, promising him a batch of cookies as a thank you. As I carried Luna home, I couldn't help but reflect on the day's chaos. I'd scoured the neighborhood inadvertently, terrified a mom, and starred as the neighborhood creep in a stranger danger saga, all because my clever, snack-obsessed puppy had a taste for adventure. Luna, oblivious to the havoc she'd caused, licked my chin and snuggled into my arms. From then on, I triple-checked the gate and kept a closer eye on my furry escape artist. But I knew deep down that Luna's smarts and charm would always keep me on my toes.